to tahrim.
Yeah. Sometimes marriage becomes fard on you.
Exactly. So for some people, bro, I know some people, it is wajib on them to get married.
It's obligatory.
100% wajib on them. It's like, bro, you need to get married. You know what I mean? But for some people, that fulfillment of lust is not enough for them, right? What's available to them, halal wise, is not enough for them. They feel like they need to go more than that because they can't control the desire of it, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes zina haram, when He makes certain sexual acts haram, what He forces the human being is a confrontation in themselves. That human being now has to sit with two loves: the love of Allah and the love of the bodily pleasure. And those two go to war with each other. The war is the point. The fight to see which one dominates is the entire point of the Sharia. It's to force you to come face to face with the realities of things that you love more than Allah. And then with your mind to say to yourself, I will not love anything more than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to force yourself to go into war with yourself. This only happens when you say La ilaha illallah with your heart. Once you have broken all of the idols that exist in yourself, the things you love more than Allah, no one can have any control over you. No one can sell you your own idols. No one can incentivize you into a system that is meant to, the modern systems of control, they're insidious. They're sinister. Gone are the days in which you were whipped until you did whatever the king wanted. Now you are bribed. You're bribed with money. You're bribed with pleasure. You're bribed to turn yourself into a willing servant.
You're deluded into it.
Very much, right? This is mata'al ghurur, right? You are bribed into making yourself someone who is going to be subservient to the order, uphold the order, because you're getting pleasure out of it.
Yeah, it's like, why whip you when I can just build a stadium and send you to a football game?
Exactly, right? But once you have said La ilaha illallah, and you've broken your own pleasure's hold over yourself, now you can look at the world and see the idols in it, and you can break those idols as well. And that is the kind of like the root fundamental element of freedom in Iqbalian thought, is that freedom is not just freedom to do whatever you want to. It's the freedom from your own self having control over yourself. It's the freedom to be able to say no
to what you want, right?
Yes. There is a type of freedom that is a freedom to say yes, and that is a very low level of freedom. And there's a freedom to be able to say no. And that is a freedom not just from other people. That's first and foremost a freedom from yourself.
That's a very high level freedom, because even if you look at a work situation, can your boss tell you to do something and you say no? You have the freedom to say yes, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I never thought about freedom in that way. La ilaha illallah in that way. That was beautiful.
I'm not saying that the Sharia has no benefit for humanity. What I'm saying is we put the cart in front of the horse very often. We think of things not in the cause and effect. We think of effect and cause. We reverse it. The benefit of the Sharia is the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on us. Right? There's a lot of benefit in the Sharia. Right? Just take the drinking example. Right? There are more people who die of intoxication-related accidents, right? DUIs in America, than almost any other man-made death cause in America every year. But the benefit is a result of us sacrificing for Allah, and Allah saying to us, because you sacrificed for me, I will do good for you. It is Allah asking us in every circumstance, what do you love more? And I'm going to be really honest with you. There's only two things you ever love in life. You either love yourself or you love Allah. And all of existence is this question.
And is that why Allah calls the kuffar, the disbelievers, arrogant? Because arrogance is this above status?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has created in all of life, right, this core question of what you love more, Allah or yourself. Kuffar always love themselves more. Kufr is a form of narcissism. The thing about love is at its core, it's a question of what do you prefer, right? So, for example, there's people who are like really cynical about love as an emotion, right? There's like, oh, it's just pleasure, right? Love is just a feeling of pleasure and a joy, and because you love the pleasure and joy, you love, and that person gives it to you, therefore you love that person, right? It's a very cynical reading of love. There are people who, for example, give up their lives for their children, or for their spouse or their mother or something like that, right? What pleasure is that person having? When someone goes and gets shot for their child, right? At Sandy Hook, for example, that was that teacher who held up on the door and got shot continuously just so that he could protect the children. What pleasure is that person getting out of getting shot, right? It's the love. Love is a preference of someone else to one's own self. That's like where love kind of really becomes love, and not just liking someone, right? I always say to like, people always ask me like, okay, how do I know I'm in love with her? You know, what is love? If you have to ask whether or not you're in love, you're probably not in love, right? It's the type of thing that like you just know, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm gone, right? Like, you don't have to ask whether or not you love your mom. You love your mom, right? If your mom cuts herself with like while she's cooking, right? You flinch. You feel almost as if that pain is happening to you, because you can imagine the human being. Human beings are like boxes, right? All of our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings are stuffed inside that box, and we think this is me, this is the other person, right? Love is the type of thing that when those two boxes come next to each other, the cardboard between the two of them starts to let things seep through. It becomes osmosis, not separation. When I say that the question of life is, do you love yourself or do you love Allah? What I mean is, do you place more priority over your own desires and loves and wants and pleasures and joys? Or do you ask yourself, or is Allah's pleasure and happiness with you even higher than your own pleasures and happiness within yourself?
So what's interesting about your political and historical analysis so far is that you've constantly referred back to the self, to the individual. Why is that? What connection are you making between the self, the individual, and the society and the ummah?
So again, I'm going to go back to Iqbal on this, right? Iqbal has three interrelated concepts. He has what's called khudi, bekhudi, and khilafat. Khudi is your understanding of yourself. Bekhudi is how that self is in relation with all of society. You can think about it, how the self dissolves into society, and then society has a self to it as well. And then the khilafat is the role of both the human being individually and the Muslim society as a collective. What role do they have in this world? The reason why I place so much emphasis on the self is because it's really helpful to bring in a non-Muslim philosopher, a very, very influential philosopher whose name was Michel Foucault. And Michel Foucault is trying to answer one of the questions that's asked by a philosopher before him by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche, fascinating character. I'm not going to go on about Nietzsche too much, but he's absolutely fascinating character. Suffice it to say that towards the end of Nietzsche's life, he actually goes insane. And if you take a lot of his thought to its logical conclusion, like it's just too much for a person to handle, you will actually go insane. But Foucault tries to answer Nietzsche's question. And Nietzsche's dominant question is, because Nietzsche doesn't believe in God, right? He doesn't believe in God. And once you don't believe in God, things like reality and morality and these types of things become very fuzzy and hazy. And so Nietzsche's core question is, okay, if we can't know what morality really is, if there's no if there's no God, there's no morality. So then where does this whole moral thing come from? We don't believe in God anymore. There's no morality. So then why do we all feel so moral about things? And Nietzsche's answer to this is that morality is basically the way that people try to control each other. Foucault takes this another step, right? He asked the question of how does the moral impulse in the human being, right? How is not just a moral impulse, but what you desire itself, right? What you want. How are these things created by the power structures around you in such a way to control you? How is your behavior and what you think is normal and what you think is good shaped in such a way that it compels you, it makes you believe that these things are right and good and therefore want to live by them? Right before Foucault died, he wanted to work on a concept called technologies of the self. And what this was, Foucault focused most of his career on this idea of power and this idea of how all of these structures create what you want and what you desire and what you think is good and normal and all of that. But what he was actually really interested in, but he died before he could actually take this project on, was how do you break out of that? And how do you create a circumstance in which you decide what it is that you want, and you decide what it is that you basically have that freedom to decide what is good and what is bad and things like that. In many ways, Yaqoub and Foucault have the same project. The difference is that Yaqoub believes in God and Foucault doesn't. Foucault completely godless in many ways. Iqbal has very many of the same critiques that Foucault does of the power structures that are around him. Iqbal has a core question that he asks early on, and then he never really touches on this. You only find references to this in his own poetry, random references. He never really spells it out. But if you take the thoughts that are embedded in his poetry and you pull on them, you actually get an understanding of what it is that he's saying. Iqbal says, we've talked about this a lot with freedom. Iqbal's thought is that when you sell your freedom, right, the freedom from yourself, when you sell that freedom, somebody is actually buying it from you, right? And that person who buys it from you is inherently more powerful than you. And they're not just selling it to you for free, right? That when they're selling it to you, it's leading you towards a certain goal. It's leading you towards a certain way. Otherwise, it wouldn't sell it to you. It's not just to make money. It's also to control you. Who are the people who are doing the selling in his context? He's living in India under British rule. Who's doing the selling? It's the Brits. And what's the goal of the Brits? It's not just to make money. It's to make the Muslim forget that he's Muslim. To imagine himself as a deficient version of a British person. And to aspire to be more British. What you're actually selling is your self-respect as a Muslim. So when you take all of that together, what you have to understand is that the Ummah's emancipation begins with the human being's own self-emancipation. You can think of emancipation as something that is achieved at the top and then brought down. Right? We win a big war, and then everybody's free, and then there's a dance number at the end of the movie. Right? Like this is one way to think of emancipation. Iqbal's thought of emancipation is ground up. You first need to be able to free the person from their own self. And then align that person with the aspiration, the ideal of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you can do that, then the society together, a society that's built of people who have freed themselves and have turned their greatest ideal to be the love of Allah, that society is then a powerful emancipatory society. And that's a society that altogether can build something, not just break something down, right? Because as people who have been repressed and oppressed and put down for 200 plus years now, we often feel like all we want to do is destroy the whole system. We just want to bring the whole thing down, but we don't think about what we're going to build. So when you have a society that is obsessed with the love of Allah, that has conquered themselves, that society is not just a society that brings down old systems. That's a society that builds new ones. Because the bringing down is out of the love of Allah. And the rebuilding is out of the love of Allah. There's no anger. There's no vengeance. There's no hatred. It's all out of love. You see the difference?
Yeah.
Not all thought is productive. Some thought is just destructive. There are certain types of thought that are only interested in what you say is what is wrong with what you say, or what is not what is contradictory in what you're saying. There are other types of thought that are trying to bring things together and figure out how we solve the problems of life. I'll give you an example for that. If somebody comes to me and says, what is the problem with materialism or capitalism or individualism, liberalism, whatever it is, right? I can give you a full list of it disconnects people from nature. For example, with capitalism, it commodifies everything. So everything that you do becomes a commodity, and then we buy and sell it. And it's almost like we're buying and selling human beings and what the value of a human being on a market, right? But I have given you a critique of capitalism. I've not given you anything to actually replace it with, right? So that's the difference between a deconstructive and a reconstructive thought. A reconstructive thought would be, okay, if capitalism is not how we're going to go with, then what are we going to replace it with? What is going to be the Muslim way of thinking about economy, thinking about organization of society, the relationship between politics and economics, things like that? Those questions are reconstructive, whereas the question of what is wrong with capitalism is deconstructive. And so when you're doing a reconstruction of all forms of human life, you have to be able to take knowledge wherever it is. Whether that knowledge is in the Western tradition, whether it's in the Eastern tradition, whether it's the Far Eastern tradition, wherever that knowledge is, you have to be able to take it and incorporate it into your own thought. Iqbal believed that in his own time, not just the average Muslim, but the Muslim intellectual as well, was not equipped enough to do that. They were only conversant, they were only talking in one tradition, whether it was Eastern tradition or Western tradition. They weren't able to bring all of the knowledges together. And he believed that would be something that could happen in the next few generations, and that was when he would become most relevant.